Hello, we are live again for another UNSHUSHED talk. Today we're speaking with Portia Brown from Revoking Sexology, and we're going to be talking about communication after sexual trauma. So yeah, just going to wait for her to join now. I can see you.
Yay!
Hello! So nice to see you.
Nice to see you also. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for joining. How has your day been so far?
It's been good. This is the
Yeah.
first real thing that I've done today, actually. I've been taking Wednesdays easy. So yeah, I'm excited to be here. How has your day been so
Yeah,
far?
it's good. I'm in London, and it's raining, but it's good. Can't complain. Um, just looking out the window, like, oh, we've reached autumn somehow. I don't even know where the year has gone.
Yeah, I know we blinked and we're back to the same weather, just in a different season in New York. It's like the last time we were outside, it looked like this. And now all of a sudden summer has passed.
Exactly. I feel like I never really got to wear my summer clothes. It's like,
No,
oh, back to the coats.
yep, here we go. I
Oh, well, at least we're all in it together. Hey, it's the same all around the world. But yeah, I saw you did a brunch on Sunday, a virtual brunch.
Yeah, I collaborated with Brunch with a Purpose
Hmm.
organization, specifically for Black women and femmes. Well, I shouldn't say Black women and femmes, but women and femmes, where they were doing in-person brunches prior to COVID, and they would have like a speaker on whatever topic come. Now they're doing virtual brunches, so I got to talk to them about sexual empowerment, and it was so much fun.
Amazing. Yeah, I saw your post. I just love obviously looking on your page. It's so like inspiring. And I saw that you did that event. I was like, oh, I missed it, but yeah, I'll definitely keep an eye out to see what else you'll be up to. But yeah, it looked like it went well. Um,
Thank you.
yeah, so I thought we could start. I've just given you a little introduction, but I don't know if you want to introduce yourself, maybe as a starting point.
Sure. Okay. So for anyone who doesn't know me, my name is Portia. On all social media platforms, I'm Poetic Sexology. I also live in Brooklyn, so if you hear construction, that is why. Uh, they're literally working on an apartment next door. So don't worry if you hear knocking. I'm a sex educator and sex and communication coach.
Mhm.
And like I said, so my specialty is helping people sort of break down communication troubles that they have in sex lives, and also helping people realize the parallels between their sex challenges and maybe challenges they have in platonic parts of their life. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, amazing. Now I saw also the article you did with Glamour, was it recently? And
Yeah.
how you're trying to remove the goopification of sex, which I just loved.
Yeah, yeah. The journalist that wrote that and we had a really good conversation about how everything doesn't need to come in a millennial pink box, and sex has become one of those things where it's like, oh, now you have, all of these different glamorized ways to get in touch with your sexuality without doing the real work. And while there's a time and a place for that, I just think that sometimes it blocks the purpose when we do that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
there needs to be, like you were saying, like an intersectional conversation around sex. Like it needs to be taken into consideration, like other parts of your life, like you were saying, and how that is actually integrated to your sex life, because actually it's all
Yeah.
connected. So,
Connected. And yeah, our emotional challenges that we think have nothing to do with sex are definitely tied to, emotional challenges that are involving sex and vice versa. And
yeah.
when, like, here, have this cute pink vibrator and it's going to fix all your problems. It's like, yeah, that'll help, but is it really going to fix all of the problems? That's the real question, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and so what we're doing on Shushbox is actually opening up the conversation for sexual trauma survivors, so people who might have experienced sexual trauma, and then that's a totally different conversation at times. It's like even the word sometimes like pleasure can be, it's, you can't use the word pleasure, like it's more focusing on intimacy. So yeah, I think there just has to be different conversations for different people within sexuality. Like it's just not one
Yeah.
size fits all.
Yeah.
But I thought I saw something else. I'm going to be referencing your page quite a lot. But I saw that you had a quote that said, consent does not kill the mood. Someone being triggered kills the mood. So I
Yeah.
thought we could start and speak about that, basically, how survivors obviously might have an additional layer of difficulty, like communicating in the bedroom, I guess, and particularly if they have maybe been triggered during sex. What advice you'd have around that, or yeah, what would you say in that situation?
Yeah, so I thank you for bringing this up. First of all, and thank you for the work that you do. And I think this conversation is not had enough. So thank you for doing this, this labor. It's very much needed. But I I came up with that quote and that idea because I was thinking about how so often people are like, oh, asking for permission around sex and sex acts is it's not sexy, and that's kind of where the consent is sexy right, comes from. But when we
Uh,
think more so like you might feel like this is killing the mood asking me for consent or asking me what my boundaries are or asking me what specific sex acts I want to consent to and which ones I do not. But really what is going to be triggering, or excuse me, what is going to kill the mood is you not asking and then me becoming triggered, me realizing that I don't want to be doing this and not having the language to do it because my partner did not ask me.
yeah,
Consent is a complicated dance. Whether you are a trauma survivor or not, it is very complex. It is not something that is ingrained into our culture, and it leads to a lot of harm sometimes.
yeah,
Um, in terms of advice I would have for people is specifically for people that are survivors and people who do experience triggers during sex or even during solo play.
yeah,
I would encourage you to have a plan to the best of your ability. Well, first of all, I would advise you to have a lot of compassion for yourself, first and foremost.
mm-hmm.
Express and give yourself a ton of compassion, a ton of self love as best you can. And secondly, have a plan. Sometimes we end up having triggers during sex and sometimes we don't as survivors. But if we know how to communicate, if we have determined the language that we are going to use, if we have
Yeah,
determined and discussed with our partners maybe some nonverbal cues,
mm-hmm.
and for care for ourselves after, I think that makes people feel a lot better. This
Yeah,
topic came up in one of the workshops I did this weekend,
mm,
discussing how sometimes fear of being triggered or
yeah,
fear of experiencing a trigger can cause us to be triggered. Like when you begin to engage in sexual play with someone or with yourself, I don't know about you or anyone watching, but a thought will flash across my forehead. It's like, oh, am I going to have a breakdown in the middle of this?
mm-hmm.
Am I going to,
Yeah.
start to
Because your
cry?
thoughts can go, you can be in the moment, but then a thought can just come up and it's like, oh,
And now you're frozen. And that's where I think the compassion and the self-love and giving yourself space and time to move through that moment or that series of moments
yeah,
and move through healing is crucial, right? Because we can't necessarily control when these things come up for us, but we can kind of learn to navigate. So determining like, okay, if I do get triggered, I'm just going to ask my partner to stop. Or if I know and I've observed from previous experiences that if I'm triggered, I have a hard time speaking. I'm just going to get up and not worry about it and explain later. And if they don't understand, then that's not the partner for me and be done with it. Right. And I just want to say, just for the sake of covering this ground, all of this is easier said than done. And it takes a lot of time to implement,
mm-hmm.
these practices and these new ways of being. But I think the first thing we have to do is believe that we can heal and we can come to a place where we can begin to exercise our voice a little bit more.
Yeah, no, I think they're totally valid. And having that compassion with yourself, like you say, it is difficult. So being compassionate towards yourself and at least knowing that you're in that healing journey and it's all a process. I guess then if somebody maybe has experienced a trauma and they're wanting to maybe communicate that with a partner before actually engaging in sex, would that be, how would you like navigate that type of conversation? Because yeah, it's maybe they want to like check or just have that conversation before even getting into the moment, so it's like, okay, this is where I'm at.
Yeah, so I think that you don't always owe people an explanation, and there are
Mm-hmm.
people that disagree with me, but if things come up and things happen and you don't want to explain to someone, let's say it's something new, it's a new relationship, or it's something casual, you don't owe an explanation to anyone, and you don't have to explain your trauma to anyone. How
Mm-hmm.
if you want to say to a partner, like, so I really like to communicate during sex, after sex, and it really makes me feel comfortable, and it really turns me on. Partner checks in with me. Here's what I would like you to say. I want you to just look at me every few moments, or maybe once or twice throughout the interaction, and say, how are
Mm-hmm.
you? Are you okay? Is this okay? And just give me the opportunity. You don't have to explain why. You don't have to explain. So I have something happen to me, and now when I have sex, sometimes I get triggered, and I sometimes
Mm-hmm.
can't. You don't have to go through all of that. You can just let them know, I love communication. It really turns me on and makes me feel really comfortable. And
Yeah.
that's something to slide in before you even get to sex, or right at the beginning of sex, or maybe after, maybe it doesn't happen before and this is someone you want to engage with again. It's a
Yeah.
conversation, have sort of debriefing sex or afterward. So yeah, that's one way you could approach it.
Yeah. No, again, like you don't have to explain yourself, like you say, but having like some support, I guess, if you are in that position and you feel like, oh, what would I do? I know you've covered tips for just like effective communication. I think you did a post maybe back in August that I really loved, and I actually was practicing some of them just in general, like life situations.
Yeah.
But I think some of the tips were like recording audio, so like actually recording yourself. And this is something that I have been doing for like the last month, and I feel like it just generally helps with communicating. You know,
Yeah.
like I used to hate voice notes, but now I'm like, I like hearing my voice, and I feel like it makes me more confident in speaking. So thank you for that tip. There was a
Yeah.
few other ones I think in that post, recording audio,
Journaling,
journaling. Yeah,
talking to your friends. For me, when it comes to communication, the stumbling block that I have is practice, right? And I think
yeah,
it's because for me personally, I was a theater kid, and I found out that I was really good at memorizing stuff. So
right.
rehearsing things has carried out throughout my life, and
Yeah,
learning what it is that I want to say and deciding ahead of time is really, really beneficial to me. And I think for people across the globe, people that are in relationships, the hard part is trying to determine on the spot how to effectively communicate how we feel. And that's really hard to do
it's
because
so hard.
you're doing so many other things. You're looking at your partner's face, you're trying to gauge their emotions and their reaction all at the same time. And then just like that, you lose your train of thought. You misspeak, you misinterpret, you leave things out. But if we take time to practice and reflect on ourselves and get feedback from a really, really trusted friend, that can
Yeah.
be endlessly beneficial to us.
Totally. Yeah, I think those tips, and it's communication in all aspects of life, like you were saying, like in the bedroom, outside, like in a work scenario, just generally, if you have trouble sometimes communicating your feelings, I think practicing feeling your feelings and then speaking your feelings. So yeah, that was really helpful.
Yeah.
When I saw that, I was like, oh wow, this really makes sense. The practice side of it.
Yeah, and for me personally, having voice memos or like listening to myself back, I get to think about, okay, how did my partner hear this conversation? Like, let's say, for instance, you're having trouble orgasming, right?
Mm,
And you want to tell your partner, like, I'm having a hard time orgasming. Listening to yourself deliver the message can
yeah.
let you sort of envision how your partner might feel hearing those words, and it may be really affirming to you, like, you know what, I don't think they're going to be mad at all, I think they're going to totally understand. Or it might be, oh, maybe I should leave out this word, or maybe I should make it more about this or that, and sort of sort everything out before you even attempt to have those conversations.
Yeah, because even, especially when it does come to sex, I mean, communicating what we want sometimes in the bedroom can be feel like quite overwhelming. So I think, yeah, like practicing it and then listening back and hearing how it comes off. I saw that you also had a compliment sandwich, which was a really cool concept. So can you explain that a little bit more what that is again?
Of course. So this is like a pretty common managerial leadership kind of tip, but I actually stole the application to sex from Shan Boudram, who is another amazing sexologist and sex educator. And
Okay.
she says that when you are giving a critique to your partner, you should give a compliment sandwich, meaning you give a
Yeah.
compliment and then a critique and then another compliment. So you say, this is great, this could be a little better, this is also great. So that way,
Yeah.
psychologically, they don't just hear the bad, they hear the good and a little bit of bad and then the good again. So they're always, you kind of warm them up with a compliment, slide the critique in, and then close the door with a compliment so that they are left with more good than bad. And another way to think about sexual communication is like emphasizing the good, right? A lot of times you're like, oh, how do I convey something I don't like that my partner is doing? I think we should put the focus on the things that you do like that your partner is doing. If I am stimulating my partner and they're like, oh, I really like that, I really like that, I really like that, I'm going
Mhm.
to keep doing it, and it's going to be less likely that I'm going to be doing something else that they don't like. So emphasizing the good is the best strategy.
Definitely, yeah, highlighting the parts that are working and then fitting in the ones that could have a little extra work on them. But yeah,
Yeah.
focusing on good, definitely. Um, and I know you've covered a lot. I know we've touched on bits of consent earlier, but you've got a lot of content around consent. And yeah, maybe I think we just spoke about it, but how can we like ensure ongoing consent?
Lots of checking in, um,
Yeah.
modeling the kind of consent that we want for our partners is a
Mm.
great way to get them to emulate that, to copy us. Basically, if you are checking in with your partner, if you are asking for their permission before you take their pants off, if you are asking for permission before you initiate another sex act, if you
Yeah.
are in the of a relationship and you're not just assuming that they want to have sex every time you want to have sex, and you're asking for consent and having those conversations before sex, during sex, and after, it's more likely that they will also model that here for you, because you're setting the tone and you are setting setting the bar for the kind of sexual interactions that you want to have. For me, consent goes way beyond the bedroom, and for all of us it should go into, the example I always use is taking fries off of your partner's plate when you're out at a restaurant. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Other
That's
times,
an example, yes.
yeah, assumed it's like, oh, I want to taste the drink they bought because they got a different drink than me. Ask,
Yeah,
can
yeah.
make things like coming home and emotionally dumping your day on your partner without asking. All of those things. Once you
Mm.
integrate it fully across your life and across all of your habits, it becomes that much easier and that much more natural in your sexual and intimate situations.
That makes so much sense. Yes, like trying it first, like elsewhere in your life, and having that ability to, or not ability, but yeah, practice again, going back to practicing. Communication is practice, isn't it? Like I've always just sometimes struggled like communicating what I feel. So I feel now. I always say that I feel, but yeah, I think practice is just so important. And just yeah, trying to have the conversations, and even if it doesn't go so well the first time, like it's still progress. So
Yes, and that's the thing I think we get caught up on. And I say we because I am included. A lot of us, when it comes to sex and relationship communications, we don't want to say the wrong thing, so we don't say anything. We just
yeah,
become completely, right? Um, I think saying the wrong thing is better than saying nothing at all because at least you're making an attempt. And as long as you're
yeah,
not delivering harm to your partner or partners, then it's okay to kind of say the wrong thing because you can always apologize, you know, and if you've laid the groundwork in your relationships, they'll understand. But not saying anything is like, that's the worst option.
that's just a guessing game, isn't it? And I mean, in some of the relationships or conversations that I've been having, like that's where the voice notes come in. So if even sometimes like WhatsApp or texting can be quite confusing, right? Like you think you're getting really clear with your message, and you send a message, and you're like, it's not what I meant. So now I'm like, okay, I'm confident with a voice note. I'm going to do a voice note and send a voice note. Yeah, maybe speaking what I'm trying to explain via text. I feel text can be quite difficult sometimes to actually get your point across with written words. Well, for me anyway.
No, I agree. I agree. I like texting when it comes to communicating certain things because it gives you time to sort of draft and filter through, but it's not for everything. And I wouldn't, unless you really know your partner and you know their preferred form of communication, I wouldn't advise, you know, sending your compliment sandwich or your sex suggestion or critique via text message unless you, like I said, you absolutely know, you know, that's what they would prefer, or maybe it's a long distance thing. But in other situations, face to face is best.
Yes. Oh gosh, face to face. It's so difficult these days, isn't it? Like at least we can do face to face.
Yeah,
Oh,
not
um,
always.
yeah, exactly. Going back to consent, then I know you also spoke about. Okay, so you've spoken about consent. There's ongoing consent, but you know, revoking consent is also something that is a thing. You know, it's okay to revoke the consent.
Yeah, it is at any time. And I think we as a society, we have a hard time wrapping our heads around exactly what that means and what that looks like because it is so rarely practiced. We feel like, especially because we live in a very heteronormative society, all of our sex is really centered around, you know, the phallus, around the penis. And it's like, well, once it gets hard, like we got to go with it until it's done,
Mm,
right? You can't get off the ride. You can't get out of the car. You can't stop. And that's not true. It's
yeah.
just, and we have to change the way that we think about sex and the way we think about mutuality in sexual situations. Um,
Hmm.
if I am having sex and it's everything is going great and everything is fine, and suddenly, I don't know, my stomach gets upset in the middle of it. I get an important phone call I know I've been waiting on. I feel triggered in the middle of
Yeah,
sex.
I was gonna say this goes back to even if you feel triggered, then you're okay to revoke the consent in that circumstance, of course.
Exactly. My partner says or does something that I don't like that causes me to end ongoing consent, then I
Mm,
have the right no longer consent and the interaction needs to stop. Or
yeah,
let's say we have me and this person have sex. I go home, I go to bed, I wake up in the morning and I realize that person coerced me into having sex with them. And I didn't really give freely given consent. Or I think in the morning, you know, there was a moment in the middle there that I really wanted to stop because this person said something to me that I thought was degrading, or they said something to me that I didn't like during sex. And I didn't stop. So that situation was not entirely consensual. You can
mm,
consent, let me say this very clearly. You can revoke consent at any point, including after sex is done. And
yeah,
again, I have a really tough time conceptualizing this, accepting this, But I think we have to normalize that in society. That doesn't always mean that, you know, someone is accusing you of a crime and they're going to press charges against you and all this stuff, but it just means, you remember that interaction we had? Yeah, it's not what you thought it was. Please learn,
Yeah.
and I'm going to learn and grow, right?
Mm. And I think you said, I mean, you just talked about it there, but there's a difference between agreeing to sex and consenting to sex.
Yes,
So,
I think I know for me and many other people who have experienced sexual trauma, we
mm,
don't want to always put certain labels on our experiences, right? We get to name our experiences and we get to say what did or didn't happen to us. And
mhm,
what some people would call a sexual assault, other people would be like, I just didn't totally consent. I agreed to have sex with that person, but I did not consent. And that's the language that they want to use, or whatever terms they want to use. You
yeah.
have that right to label your experience. And
Hmm.
I've been having a lot of conversations with a lot of people who are saying, I agreed to have sex, but I didn't consent. So what does that mean? It's
Yeah.
if you can identify with, you maybe knew a person wanted to have sex with you, they began to put pressure on you, and you're like, all right, let me just get this over with because I don't know what's going to happen if I try to say no. So you kind of just agree.
Yeah.
That's the nuance there that I'm trying to find basically with that language. And I think a lot of people have had that experience where it's like, oh, you shouldn't have let me buy you dinner, or I was going to pay for your Uber home but now I'm not because I thought we'd have sex, and why else did you come over here, things like that. And then you end up agreeing to have sex with someone that maybe you wouldn't have in other circumstances. In that case, it's not ongoing, not freely given consent.
Yeah.
It's you know what I mean?
Totally. Yeah. And I feel like those circumstances, thinking back now, it's like a lot of times it was more like agreeing to sex rather than, it's like you get put in a situation where you feel like, which is wrong to feel that way, but it's just kind of like, I guess, how I felt at the time, but like just agreeing to it because you've gone so far already with the whole date or whatever it is. It's like, oh, I'm in this position now. It's like, how do I back out? I can't back out. Yeah. So I can totally like
Yeah.
relate to that. Yeah, gosh, we've already covered so many of the points that I wanted to go through. Yeah,
That's
communication. But I saw you did a recent post. So we've talked about a lot about obviously consent, communication, effective communication in the bedroom. But a recent post that you did was you said the most important sexual relationship is the one that you will have with yourself. Cultivate
yeah.
intimacy with yourself, and I feel that is. I would like to talk about that if we could a little bit, please.
Yeah.
Yeah.
About this a lot, and I do offer one-on-one coaching, and this comes up time and time again with all of my all years that I coach. A
Yeah.
lot of times we'll enter a discussion and it's a lot of, well, my partner, I want to tell them this, I want to get them to, and it's like, what about you? They're not on this call. You are on this call. Your partner is not the center of your sexuality. You know what I'm saying? Your partner
Mhm.
is not the only person that you need to be focused on, right? We
Yeah.
all deserve to have an intimate relationship with ourselves. That can include loads of self pleasure. That can include buying yourself sex toys so you can just make yourself
Mhm.
high heaven as often as you want, right? But in cultivating intimacy with yourself is something that I've been exploring and trying to like really define for myself and my life. And in a lot
Mhm.
of ways, like what we would call self-care, right? Really putting myself first, exploring my sensuality in a way that doesn't include anyone else's gaze,
Mhm.
anyone else's anyone else's involvement. That means taking long hot baths. That means getting up early in the morning to meditate and masturbate and journal, right? And carving out that time for myself. That means taking photos of myself that I'm not going to send to anyone, taking nudes of
Yeah.
myself with no intention of ever sharing it, and just loving on myself in that way. Cultivating intimacy for yourself can look a lot of different ways, and it depends on your life structure, your
Mm.
preferences, what your goals are, and what, you know, what experiences you've had. But I think at the end of the day, we all can benefit from having sexual experiences, sensual experiences, intimate experiences that don't include anyone else and don't aim to please anyone. I always say that like you just quoted, the most important sexual relationship you'll have is with yourself, because a lot of our healing from traumas, a lot
Hmm.
of our healing from just the way the world has told us sex is supposed to be, that healing takes place when we are alone. And
Yeah.
then when you have a partner, then when you're in a relationship, then when you're intimate with someone else, it can be that much better.
Totally, yeah. Starting with you and carving that time out for yourself. One of the things that I love to do is dancing in the mirror,
Yes.
naked, and I'm like, this is just, that's how I like sometimes practice intimacy, I guess, with myself.
I I
Yeah.
love all so important. Looking at your body, being free, watching it, watching the beauty of you through your own eyes. That's
Hmm.
that's a great tip. And actually, if anyone watching is interested, there is another she's a sex doula, sex educator, Evian Whitney.
Mm.
On her platform, she hosts sort of movement meditation
Oh,
where,
basically gonna check
and
her
yeah,
out.
yes. She's a fabulous sex educator, but yes, those things are very important. And that, I think, movement and dancing and watching our bodies move and be free is very intimate and very healing. I think.
Yeah, and I mean, you can go through all the emotions as well. So intimacy, sometimes if you've got a bit of anger, it's like you pick the
All of it.
song, you like move, like, yeah, shake it off.
All of it. All of it. Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah. Well, I think that's pretty much everything I wanted to cover. Is there anything else? I know you spoke about you do the coaching one-on-one. So how can people work with you? Yeah, how can we get in touch?
Of course. Yeah. So if anyone wants to work with me, you can find me on Instagram, Froetic Sexology. I'm Froetic Sexology on Twitter and Facebook and YouTube as well. My website is froeticsexology.com. I have a poorly kept blog, but a blog nonetheless on
I
there.
love the blog. No, I had a look. It's great.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. More consistent, but you know, life is happening.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can book one-on-one coaching calls with me on froeticsexology.com. I also have a 4-week program where it's a little bit more expansive. We talk once a week. I give you journal prompts, I give you meditation,
Mm.
and we do video calls instead of phone calls. So if you're interested
Okay.
that, visit my website. And I do have set pricing, but my rule is no woman or femme gets turned away. So if for some reason, you know, especially right now during COVID,
Yeah.
you're facing financial hardship and you don't have the funds, DM me, let's talk through.
Oh, amazing, Portia. It was so lovely speaking to you. I've learned so many amazing tips and just communication. Gosh, it's like so important in every element, like aspect of life. And I just think, yes, you are the queen of communication.
I try. And when this is all done, London was actually on my travel list for this year, but you know, couldn't happen. But when all this is done, if I'm ever around, I will definitely find you. I would love to
Yes,
chat.
I would love to chat too. So yeah, totally going to stay connected. I'll be keeping an eye out as well for all the events that you're doing and everything that you're up to. So yes, thank you so much for joining us.
Take care. Thank you.
See you soon. Bye. Bye, everybody.